Good morning, this is Edie Heineman. It's October 25th and I'm here with Carol Letson, who is interviewing with me Nancy Hazard. And Nancy Hazard was at the very beginnings of the start of Greening Greenfield. We have seen Sandy Thomas's role in the establishment of the Energy Park, which we were told was kind of the background for Greening Greenfield. And we've also interviewed Tom Murphy, who was the start of the Greenfield Energy Committee, a volunteer committee that was focused on helping to make Greenfield a green energy town. We're going to now hear from Nancy about where she was during those two activities very briefly, and then take us into the formation of Greening Greenfield from the Greenfield Energy Committee, and we'll have some specific questions about that. But right now, let's start with, where were you and what role did you play during that time? We're talking about 2007-ish, before and after.
So I'm going
to repeat that question. Nancy, if you would tell us where you were at the time of very briefly, the establishment of the Energy Park and then the Greenfield Energy Committee, and what you saw happening that led to Greening Greenfield.
Well, it's really great to think back all those years. And I became employed by the Northeast Sustainable Energy Association, which created the Energy Park. And I was involved in writing a grant, a CMAG grant, Congestion Mitigation and whatever that stands for, which was the beginning of the Energy Park. It created the money that enabled NESE, to Northeast Sustainable Energy Association, to hire Sandy. And then Sandy picked up that ball and ran with it. It was fabulous. And as you noted, well, actually, Sandy and Tom Murphy together, as far as I remember, started the Energy Committee to really understand Greenfield's energy issues and to move that forward. In 2006, I believe, I retired from NESE. And I had time on my hands, so I had not joined the Energy Committee before that. But at that point, I joined it. And I learned of a fabulous program. I guess I'm all about money, but a state program which had to do with green energy. And they had they offered something where, if we promoted their green energy and we got people to sign up for it, they would give us some money for each person that we signed up. And so we saw that as a way of collecting some money so we could do something and move forward. And that was really helpful. Also at that time, Mayor Forgy was Chris Forgy was the mayor, and we approached her and asked her if she would like to collaborate with us on trying to get this money, and because it had to be the city needed to apply for it, and so and she said yes. So we had this fabulous relationship with Chris Forgy, and we agreed that we would collaborate and create a campaign in Greenfield called Greening Greenfield. So when...
May I interrupt here a minute? Let me be clear. Were you part of the Greenfield Energy Committee doing this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we worked with the Energy Committee, and so this is when the Greening Greenfield, well, the beginning of Greening Greenfield. So that campaign was created, and then we worked with Chris also with Chris Forgy to do. We we told her about the ICLEI opportunity of doing an energy audit, and she agreed to do that and to help us. And so she went to her alma mater, Smith College, and looked for an intern to actually do the work, which was fabulous. And she also talked with Sandy Shields, who was the director, the DPW director. And Sandy agreed to give her a desk in the DPW office and to work with her. And the thing that was really successful about that is it was the first time that Greenfield attempted to get in one place how much energy it was using and what kind of energy it was using and where that energy was being used. So we ended up with a database of every single building that the municipality owned, and also, of course, things about the solid waste management treatment, all of and vehicles that are used by the town. So all of that stuff we used the ICLEI software and got that in one place. And then in 2008, I think it was 2007, the Greenfield Energy Audit was published. Now the purpose of ICLEI's purpose was to get the town to create a climate action plan. Now, we've actually never done that, but we now have the database of where we're starting, and that ICLEI program, not only the municipal energy use, but the entire town. And we worked with Chris, and we ended up with two major goals. And one was to reduce our climate emissions by 80% by 2050, which at that time was kind of very forward-thinking. And the second one had to do with money. And this one was very bold. And I'll tell you why we ended up with the money. But the goal was to, in 2050, that we would not be spending money collectively, that all of the residents of Greenfield, we would not be spending money on energy, oil, gas, electricity, whatever, that went outside of the region, that it would be zero. And the reason that happened is because the most important thing that came out of the energy audit was how much money we collectively were spending on energy in the community. And then we analyzed whether that money stayed in Greenfield or whether it left. So it stayed in Greenfield to pay people like people who read the meters, or the people who repaired the electric lines or the gas lines and that sort of thing. Well, otherwise, the source, of course, of gas or electricity or whatever, the fuel came, was all sent outside of the region. And so we discovered that as collectively, we spent $87 million a year on energy. And of that, $67 million left the community. And so we can immediately see what was causing poverty in Greenfield. And that was very compelling to our next mayor, his name?
Bill Martin.
Bill Martin. Thank you. Bill, however, did not want to work with us closely the way Chris Forgy had done. He did not want to work on a joint campaign called Greening Greenfield. And so because of that, went back to the committee and said, well, okay, he doesn't want to do that. Why don't we change our name and we'll just take that name on and carry that forward.
So may I interrupt a minute? So what I'm hearing is that Greening Greenfield started as a campaign to keep the money for energy in Greenfield.
Well, it was broader than that, but you're right. That was the thing that Chris Forgy was interested in. But her father had worked for General Electric and was very involved in alternative energy and wind power and stuff. And he had always said to her, renewable energy is the future.
Okay.
And so she saw this as an opportunity to really carry forward her father's legacy and implement that. So it was mostly about energy, but it was broader than that. It was really involved anything that had to do with sustainability. And I don't have the brochure in front of me, but you can look at our mission statement. And it has to do with, we took the definition of sustainability that was developed worldwide, which had to do with finding the sweet spot between social equity, economic vitality, and environmental justice, or a good environment. So that was we had that very big picture, and so of course we've had lots of discussions about, well, where is that sweet spot and how do you get there? And here we are, umpteen years later, struggling with a piece of that which people hadn't really been thinking about for forever.
I'm going to try to recap again to be sure that I'm hearing you correctly. So the beginnings were the Energy Park, moved into Greenfield Energy Committee, moved into Greening Greenfield, but the initial stages was a partnership between Chris Forgy and this new entity, which was not quite an entity yet. It sounds like it was a campaign called Greening Greenfield, in which there was an energy audit which was begun using an intern from Smith and yourself and Chris Forgy and others, and that focused a campaign on sustainability called Greening Greenfield. And that brought you to what year, and what actually created the establishment of the organization Greening Greenfield, from those actions and campaign objectives to a organization?
Well, the Greenfield Energy Committee was consistent. So the Greenfield Energy Committee did all those things. It's just that the name of the organization changed.
Okay. And the name changed at what time? We do have it in that paper history.
Yeah.
Actually,
well,
it just says...
It had two changes, actually. It went from the Energy Committee, I think, to the Energy and Sustainability Committee. And then, after Chris Forgy left, we had that discussion, and we decided, well, we need this. This is a great campaign. We have a brochure, all that sort of thing.
That's interesting, because I did not pick up on that it was the Energy and Sustainability Committee before Greening Greenfield. So that brings along sustainability.
Do you remember, Carol?
In here, it's called the Move to Sustainable Greenfield.
Okay, well, I'd have to look that up.
Yeah,
and I didn't, unfortunately, bring the brochure, which I should have done.
It's a minor detail, but there are various points that are helping me see this progression, and I can see the people working at it. You had a relationship with the mayor. It was a public-private collaboration. And who were the other people? And I hear you in a room with data and an intern with data and getting the energy audit. Who else was around you at that time?
Oh, Carol and Peter and Becca. And
you disappeared for days at a time with the data.
There were a lot of people around at that moment, but it's true that I was the only person who was interested in the data and struggling with the data.
And that year, what was that year that you struggled with the data?
It must have been 2006 because the audit was published in. Well, actually, the audit was published in 2008. Is that right, Carol?
Yeah, I think so.
So then it must have been 2007 that I really struggled.
Okay.
And I struggled after the intern left. We had all the data, but we didn't have a report, and that was my job.
That was your job.
And not only did we not have a report, we didn't have a way of communicating what we found to other people, and I struggled with creating a PowerPoint.
That's what it was.
And I kept putting in too much information.
And did you finally communicate it to the townspeople?
We did. We had a big meeting at the, I believe, the high school in the cafeteria. And we had a huge screen, and Sandy Shields, who was the DPW director, who'd been so involved in all of this, she spoke, and I said a few words too. But in hindsight, we had. It's interesting. I learned a lot. I just learned a lot. It's interesting how when you research something that has so much information, it's like figuring out what the salient point is. And in fact, the thing that I just told you about money, that was the salient point. But we could have just had a meeting that said that one fact and moved on. But no, we had to talk about every single building and what we had learned. And yeah, there was lots of detail that we shared.
Well, it's good to convey the complexity of it too. I mean,
and
you
we
could
still
get
have
to the
that
point.
PowerPoint.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Somewhere.
Good.
So I'm hearing the kind of efforts and work that went into the energy audit and the report and the birthing of this idea of sustainability and a sustainable Greenfield. And where did you now? I mean, the history, we do have a timeline documented on paper. So what I want to hear from you, Nancy, is what you take away from your experience with Greening Greenfield, the time it became Greening Greenfield, and its view of the future. What do you see in that long 12-year history, 10, 12, 14-year history, that's really salient to you as a consistent, I would say, driver of the organization, albeit very much in the background, which is your philosophy?
Well, when you ask that question that way, I'm going to have to say one of the things I think that was that I learned. I had been a project manager for almost 20 years, and so I brought that experience with me, and it became clear that the group didn't really want a leader that way. And so Sandra Boston introduced me to, my memory fails me,
Okay.
the name of the person, the book that, anyway, famous person who talked about organizing and how you move things forward. And she talked about how alive it can be if you have a leaderless organization. And that when you have a leaderless organization with a lot of very passionate and dedicated people, that it creates space and room for anyone in the organization to step up and to carry their vision forward, as opposed to following someone else's. I guess it's the difference between an autocratic government and a democracy.
A pure democracy.
A pure democracy. So it could be complete chaos. And I guess some people may think that's what it's been. But from my perspective, it has enabled the organization to do many, many different things. And the first thing that really emerged that it was really important was that Susan Wargaftic and Becca stepped up to the plate and created the Greenfield 10% Challenge. So that was their vision. Their vision was to get 10% of the households in Greenfield to make a commitment to lower their fuel use by 10% by the end of 2010. So there's the 3 10s. And I honestly thought it was impossible. And I was like, I hated the idea of having a campaign that was going to fail, that wasn't going to achieve its goal. Now there's 8,000 households in Greenfield. So we needed 800 households to sign on. And they created a lawn sign. And much to my complete amazement, 1,000 households joined that campaign. Wow. It was amazing. And we had a database which you, Edie, now are the keeper of, the Civi database that we have. So that was sort of, we really collected the names of so many different people, and so that we could communicate with them and tell them what we were doing. So that was really a key piece. Now, since my background is about energy, I tend to gravitate towards the things that I remember in my head have mostly to do with energy, but there were so many other things. I mean, for example, the film series that came out, and I think maybe Sandra started it, and then Becca did it, and then Louise picked it up and did it for like forever. And I don't know,
I didn't.
Carol,
I supported it.
Yeah, I didn't support it. But we also have a rule that, I guess this is so organized chaos, that if you have an idea, you have to have a partner. So there have to be two people in the organization that want to move something forward, and then the organization as a whole needs to agree that they want to work on that. And so that's the other thing that this leaderless organization sort of that I've witnessed is people stepping up to the plate. To each month we have a business meeting. There's people who step up to the plate to facilitate that meeting, create the agenda. Then there's people who write notes and minutes and keep track of all that stuff. I mean, that's completely amazing to me. As a project manager, I never thought that people were self-motivated enough to actually meet all those deadlines. So that was really a learning experience for me. So the whole thing with the energy audit led to the ability of Greenfield to apply for Green Communities designation, and that was huge, because most towns the towns needed to have an energy audit to apply, and we had one, so we applied. So that was cool, and we were in the first group of people that were Greenfield was in the first group of towns that were designated as green communities. So that was like a big success, and we have this photograph of people celebrating. We went down to Boston to receive sort of accolades for doing that.
And what year was that you got the award? The designation, actually.
I believe it was 2010, but it might have been 2009.
And Greening Greenfield was meeting on a regular basis at this time?
Yes.
Greening Greenfield had been meeting on a regular basis all along.
Okay.
Yeah, 2010, Greenfield was the first group of towns. Yep, designated. And Green Communities, the reason it's really important is because the state gives awards to towns who have chosen to be a green community, who've made the commitment to be a green community. And because of those awards and because of that commitment, Bill Martin hired Carol Collins to be our energy and sustainability officer. And we were one of the first towns in Massachusetts who had that position. And as you know, I mean, Carol has been amazingly successful in not only being clear about what needs to be done in the municipal buildings and the cars and all that other stuff, but also finding grants to do that work. So all of the work that has been done in Greenfield to reduce energy use has been done through grants. And she also has been successful in really embracing and moving forward the concept that we need a fossil fuel free future. So it's a little hard to say, but she liked using those words, not saying that we want to be 100% renewable. And I get that now, because that is the goal, is that we don't want to use any oil or gas or anything that gives off carbon, anything that would be contribute to climate change. So that's been huge. The other sort of huge thing, again, on the energy side, is that Pam Kelly and I partnered with the town, with the planning department, and wrote a grant to the EPA, and we got money for 3 years, and we called it the Energy Smart Home Program, and there was also an Energy Smart Business Program, and our goal was to reach every single household in Greenfield to tell them about the programs that are available to help them not only reduce energy but save money in their homes. And we got the program called for recruiting kids from GCC to be our canvassers, and actually Carol Collins was in charge of that before she became the sustainability officer, and so that was amazing. And every single home was touched, but our goal really was to focus on the lower income people, and we realized we were not being very successful about that because many of the buildings that house lower income people are multifamily homes owned by somebody else, and that there's a locked door at the front and a corridor behind the door where the doors to the apartments are. And the only thing we could do is put our door hanger on that front door. So that work is just ongoing, and it's been really interesting just in the last couple of weeks, the amount of discussion on the state level about reaching those people and getting them, reducing their costs, but not only but reducing climate change emissions. So getting them off of oil and gas and getting everybody onto electricity, because once everybody is heating and cooking and lighting their homes, etc., with electricity, then you have the opportunity of getting to that fossil fuel-free future, that zero carbon vision that we're all trying to do now. And of course, Massachusetts just passed another amazing law to take us to the next step, which is totally amazing. I've been listening, sort of getting in on that, but with every 5 years checking in, how many emissions do we have, what is our plan for the next 5 years, et cetera, to get us all the way to zero in 2050.
I'd like to ask a question here, because I hear hidden in that question what you've mentioned and alluded to, but I don't hear you saying that's how we're getting to it, is the owners of the buildings that the low-income people are living in. It's those people that you have to be reaching, correct?
That is correct. And there's a new program which is just being rolled out right now, which I'm excited about, and I'm hoping that we can spread the word about it. It's actually kind of based on the Energy Smart Home model that we created, and it's the money came to FERCOG to do it. It's being implemented by Community Action. Community Action historically has dealt with only the low-income people, but this is going to be any resident in town can come, and so you've got a local person now who could help you understand how to use Mass Save, how to get into it. And it's not just Mass Save, but Mass Save, which historically has dealt with insulation, is now also dealing with heating systems and moving people to air source heat pumps, so that's all electric. And also they're also talking about solar panels. So again, you can bundle it together now, insulate your home, change your heating system, put solar on the roof, and then you'd be truly a zero carbon building. And I've just recently talked to a couple people who just really had a hard time, and the smart people and whatever, who had a really hard time navigating this. It's not easy. It's not easy. But the state is pressing the utility companies who run Mass Save. They are now pressing them to actually change how that program is managed, so that it's not managed just by the utility companies. It's going to be, hopefully, if we pass the bill, it's going to be managed by other people with the utility companies, so that hopefully it's going to get better. It's gotten better and better over the years, but
to reach the low-income housing.
The landlords.
The landlords.
Well, yeah, the landlords, but not just the landlords, to reach everybody. I mean, so Senator Barrett, I mean, I'm getting very political, but which I don't usually do, but he's been leading the charge on the climate stuff, and he was talking about realistically how much money it is going to cost to convert every single building to zero carbon emissions by 2050. He thinks it will be $30,000 per building to do the energy stuff, and then to do the weatherization and et cetera, and then another $10,000 to do the heating systems, and he's probably right, and he's concerned about where that money comes. And one of the things he was talking to a 350 crowd, 350.org crowd, and he was saying your job should be to tell everybody about heat pumps, because people are seeing electric vehicles coming, and you see them on the road, right? But the heating systems are hidden, as is the insulation. That's a huge problem. And so when somebody's heating system fails, what do they usually, let's say they're heating with gas, what do? They go to the gas company who's been servicing them all along and say, I need a new boiler, or I need a new heating, and some of those heating companies are installing heat pumps and some aren't. But if the owner isn't asking for that, they're probably not going to make that switch.
Right.
So there's a huge, we've been doing this for years, but I guess the exciting part is that we have new technology that we didn't have 10 and 15 years ago. We didn't have the cold weather heat pumps. And I know you can't solve all the problem with technology. I understand that. But it's an important piece of the puzzle. And when you think, I was thinking about, $50,000 per building, how are we going to afford that? Well, as another friend pointed out to me, just think what it costs to build new. It's going to cost so much more. I mean, you can't replace those buildings with new buildings. So another way of looking at it, it's not that expensive.
Looking at the values today, $30,000 seems to be quite a small percentage. I can see your excitement, and you're definitely grounded in energy issues, and it's important. It continues. It's as technology develops, the issue becomes a little bit more foreseeable in getting to the goal, and less so. It's just a mixed bag. We are talking about Greening Greenfield as an organization, and I'm intrigued by this leaderless group because I've experienced it and had the same kind of like a person who organizes and manages myself, or have done in the past, wasn't sure that I could sustain this. It was like chaos to me, if I might interject my own feelings about it. But I've seen what you're talking about, that it works. And it is driven by a general philosophy called sustainability. And as an organization, it continues today. And the campaigns for energy have now spread to other campaigns. I'd like to hear about what you think about the other. You can name those campaigns. And what you see for the future of the organization, Greening Greenfield. Here we are in 2021. So that's a decade of activity of Greening Greenfield, moving from energy into other issues. Can you talk about some of the other issues?
Great questions. I want to say one thing before I move there, which is I totally forgot to mention Greening Greenfield's participation, and for that matter, pressing for the town's master plan to focus on sustainability. And so that was in 2014, that was finally published.
Okay.
And again, obviously, master plans are a lot about energy, but they're also about so many other things. But energy goes through all those chapters, the chapter on housing, the chapter on transportation, it's a chapter on open space, all that stuff. So that was also, I think, a big... And we're now implementing that. So that's usually for 10 years. And there is a committee in town called the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee, which is sort of a watchdog for that sustainability plan. So I see the value. Government is slow, but I see the value of getting things down, making commitments, and then be sure that that plan doesn't end up on the shelf. Be sure that plan is worked, that you actually do the things that it says in the plan. And fortunately, we have some fabulous people in town who sit on that committee who are making sure that that is the case. But thank you for asking about new campaigns. So,
before you jump, the people on that committee are both citizens and government people. It's a joint committee?
It is. That committee is unique, I believe, in Greenfield. And again, I was instrumental in setting that committee up. It felt like if anything was going to move forward, we not only needed the residents of Greenfield to be sitting at the table with their passion, but we also needed the staff people who implement this stuff. And so it's been a really rich and interesting committee to sit on, and it's been fun working with the staff and having an opportunity to get to know the staff better, because a lot of residents, we don't have that opportunity. So Carol Collins, that I mentioned, sits on that committee. DPW director sits on that committee. The MJ Adams, who's involved in economic development, sits on that committee. So it really it's exciting to see how things move forward, slowly, but they do move.
Good.
So
Okay, thank you.
So new campaigns. So I have to confess that I was getting kind of exhausted. I felt like I was beating my head against a wall as far as trying to convince people to upgrade the energy of their homes. We did zillions of workshops, and people would, a few people would come every time, but there just wasn't the groundswell that I was hoping for, or that I just imagined in my head. And there was, of course, the solar campaign.
Solar Challenge.
The Solar Challenge, which actually the town took the lead on that, which was fabulous. So all these little bits. But I started, one of the things that's showing up in, which is now showing up in everyone's climate change plans, is the role of nature in trying to meet the challenge of the climate crisis, and that the nature has the ability to sequester carbon. But also we see the crisis of the birds, that United States lost 8 billion birds, so a third of its bird population over 50 years. Was another study that came out of Europe that showed that they had lost 80% of their insects, which is a major source of food for the birds. And so that put us, and there was a lot in the news about pollinator collapse and honeybees collapsing and stuff. So now this is an area that I really knew virtually nothing about. And so we set about doing a collective learning effort around pollinators. We figured a lot of people are interested in pollinators. We can get them in the door, and we can find some really interesting people to speak about that. And so we held a bunch of things, and it was like every time we held an event like that, 60 people would show up. They were enthused, they wanted to chat with each other after the meetings, which was a new experience for me. The energy people on the home side, they didn't really have that interest. And everyone has yards. Everybody has an opportunity to make a difference right there in their own backyard or front yard, as the case may be. And we learned a lot. And then I learned about this person, Doug Talamay, who is a professor down in Maryland, who has spent his life studying about moths and butterflies. and the full life cycle of moths and butterflies. And it turned out that one of his students lived in Shutesbury, who I absolutely adore, Desiree Narango. She came and spoke to us twice, and we learned that how important the moths and the butterflies are for birds, and the life cycle, how it involves trees. And that really got me interested because I love trees. I've always loved trees. I'm not so much of a flower person. So anyway, so we've created this campaign, Planting for Pollinators. Oh, and by the way, moths and butterflies are pollinators, so that's part of the whole thing. And we now have sort of two sub-campaigns, one that focuses on bees and insects and stuff. And by the way, honeybees are not native to the United States. So that's another thing we all learned. There's over 200 native pollinators in our area. And then, or bees I should say, in our area. And then another campaign which focused on birds and moths and butterflies. And we learned that in order for a chickadee to raise their young, 70% of the foliage in the area near their nest, within 50 meters of the nest, needs to be native foliage, that it can't be something from afar. And that led to the Greenfield Tree Committee, who had analyzed the trees in Greenfield and discovered that 50% of our trees are Norway maples. So they're from Norway, they're not from the United States. And that those trees, they don't host the moths and butterflies the way our native maples do. And so then the tree committee created a list of recommended trees to plant in our tree belts and in people's yards that are almost all native. There's some crabapple trees in that list and stuff like that, but not much. It's mostly native. So those are kind of the spin-offs that you talk about on that side. And then the other huge project that that Peg Hall created has to do with plastic. And it wasn't just Peg either. It sort of started with
Rights of Nature group.
Yeah, that's right. That's
when
right.
I came into
Sandra
town,
and
Sandra Boston and Louise Amio started the Rights of Nature group, and had a campaign going to just emphasize the rights of nature, and that led to plastics. I have less memory than you do. Since this is all new, it sort of just swirls around in my head, but that was the origin, and they're still, their identity as being part of Greening Greenfield is still in question by them, because they do see themselves as an outside group but an inside group, because many people from Greening Greenfield are part of the reusable bag that came out of the, what was there was the banning of plastics in Greenfield, a petition. That was the Rights of Nature campaign.
Single-use plastic bags and plastic bottles.
And bottles.
Oh, and takeout containers, I think. Those three things.
And they successfully got the banning of
the takeouts.
Takeouts.
Yeah.
And that morphed into a reusable bag campaign that is alive and well, and teaching others around the region to make reusable bags out of feed sacks and various reusable plastic bags that are used for grain and feed for animals. So yes, reusable bag is a very viable campaign.
And I see that campaign growing broader.
Yes.
Because Peg Hall, who's now really sort of pushing that forward, she's worked in the solid waste management world her entire working life,
right,
and is still consulting in that area, and has a much bigger vision of how to really change how producers change, that they don't give us all this waste that we have to get rid of.
Product stewardship.
Thank you. That's the word.
Is a big movement on her part. She's very knowledgeable in both how products originate and go through the life cycle, and all of it's left on the consumer's backs instead of the manufacturer's backs, and how to move that out. But she's also knowledgeable in legislation writing and policy writing So she's been a great asset in that campaign and further in Greening Greenfield, which is demonstrating your point of getting one person in a group to get a partner, and you've got an action.
Well, and actually, you know, we maybe haven't labeled this as a campaign, but there is also our housing campaign.
That's
So,
where
you know,
we're leading to.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
I
we
think
partnered with
yes.
FCCPR to create a forum and spent a couple of years. Susan Wargaftik took the lead on this, and she's taken the lead on a series of forums actually every other year for many years, and there's one on food, there was one on visioning the 21st century, there was one on transportation, but this one on housing, it's different in that the forum has led to a whole campaign, and the other ones didn't kind of do it that way, or rather other people carried it. Like the food piece really ended up being just roots, and the whole that the town took the poor farm and put it into an APR thing, and just roots then became the tenant of that property, and that came out of our food forum. But now Greening Greenfield they're doing such a fabulous job. There's no need for us to be involved with that. Although now we're working with them on pollinators, so that's been a really fun sort of full circle.
Working with who on pollinators?
With Just Roots.
Just Roots,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
There are many spin-offs from Greening Greenfield that is also an interesting framework of what Greening Greenfield is. It starts with a project, an idea, and it's from the citizens. It's not from the government, it's from the citizens. And they move it forward, either passing it on, remaining in partnership with, or becoming a totally new entity. And housing, I see, is one of the deepest, most complex issues. And to see Greening Greenfield, it's been a question in my mind. One, how to enter that conversation, because I do know the complexity of it, and I'm not a homeowner any longer, and the private ownership is a very important issue in this country. How do we become a country that revisits common good and having ownership for or not ownership, but shelter for everyone in a secure way, that you can't have the rug pulled out from under you any moment. I live with that, If you don't pay, it's out. And Greening Greenfield, that's what this is about. This oral piece is about the organization of sustaining an organization without a leader, with enormously complex problems, taking on one of the biggest ones, moving from energy to food to pollinators, all of them under the sustainability, now to housing. And what's the shape of the future, I guess I'm thinking, for Greening Greenfield?
Oh, well, that's a good question. And as you talk about this, I'm realizing that we left out some other huge pieces.
I'm sure we have, because it's a huge...
So one huge piece, actually, two things that you're very involved with, Edie, is, well, we do these nature walks.
Yes.
So that, the connection to nature. And then working with the schools.
Right.
Working with the schools. We have worked with the schools for a long time. And it started with an energy thing, actually. We had an expo called the Sustainable Expo or something like that, and Sustainability Expo, and we hired someone actually to help us who was an educator to organize that and to create projects and other things for kids, because that isn't really our area of expertise, or that is not our area of expertise. So and now that has moved into the work that you're doing, Edie, and we worked with, then that morphed into working with the 5th grade on their water project and sustainability around water issues, and now you're working in the garden project. Maybe
Correct.
You want to say a few words about that.
Well, I've done work with schools in my past, just being a very active parent, and also becoming very heavily involved in the politics of the school. And so I came with a light foot into this, because I really think everything has to come from the school. As a community organization, we can support and we can plant ideas, but they have the chaos of many different entities coming down on them with rules and regulations on what they have to satisfy, plus the parents who are always pulling them in all directions. So I've just considered my role as being someone who can remind them that yes, we're here to support you. We can give you what you need. You need to tell us what it is you need, and we'll keep you on task as much as we can. And so we've been very fortunate to have a science teacher in the 5th grade, Anna Marchewska, who has carried the water project through and made it into the curriculum. That's important, getting it into the curriculum, but it has to be done by the principal and the teachers. And now we have a principal who also is using every tool in her toolbox, so she engages with us, and she has a young teacher who's decided to really put her outside interest. I don't know how they administer that, but I'm sure she's got a role in the school where she has to do something extra, and she does the garden with the kids, and she's very exciting and energetic and engages the kids after school. She happens to be the second language teacher, and just has a wonderful way of presenting what they want to grow and how they grow and how it adds to the beauty of the school, but also the feeding of the community. So that's all I have to say for now, is that it really comes from the school, not from Greening Greenfield. We are there in the background to nudge them when we can and not be too pushy, because they have so many demands on them from the community.
And we've been able
state
to offer financial support.
Yes, we give them financial
when they
support.
ask for it.
Yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that's the youth program, which is part of the Greening Greenfield schema. It's like a schema. It's like an electric. Go back to your electric. It's like all those little, when you look at a circuit board, you look at all those little paths that move and intersect and move away and come back and intersect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, another example of that sort of that leadership, people taking individual, following their, is the work that you've done, Carol, and with recognizing this problem of gas leaks in town, for example.
Yeah.
And you just stuck with that for years. We did a what would you call it? An audit of the.
It was an audit of how much fuel is being detected in our air.
Escaped.
Yeah. Fuel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which of course is both a health hazard and also could explode, as we've seen.
Yeah. Yes, we did a lot of educating for the public on that, and with HEAT, H-E-E-T, an organization in the eastern part of the state. So that was a big help to have that.
And then once we had that report, we approached the DPW.
Yes.
To try to get them, and also the gas company,
and to
try to get them to fix it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what came out of that was, we changed DPW directors in the midstream, but what came out of that is that there was, let's say 2 years ago, there was a plan coordinated between Berkshire Gas and the City of Greenfield for when the City of Greenfield publishes where they're going to resurface streets, that's where the gas company should go in before they resurface the street and check on the gas lines at that street. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's going now. I need to go back and check and see if it's still going on.
It's good to check. The other thing that came out of that study is that the tree committee, one of the problems with gas that's leaking from gas lines is that it kills trees. The other problem is that when the gas line is in the tree belt, that the DPW won't plant a tree there. So that's been a huge problem in town. And so a couple of people connected with the tree committee took the gas company on. It's not, boys, good for them, is all I can say. and that was successful. So they actually succeeded in getting in the future, the gas company will be putting their lines on the edge of the road, not underneath the tree belt. And so that's huge.
That is huge.
Yeah, it's huge. So those spin-offs that you're talking about.
And that's where that combined planning between the DPW road resurfacing and our gas company, they have to talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Thank goodness.
Yes. Yeah. It's really
Remember
good.
when Norm Tiedemann, our town manager, he would just pull a few hairs left in his head out because as soon as he resurfaced a road, the fuel company would come in and dig it up again.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, another project that you've been following for years is trying to advocate for better public transportation. And so I don't know that we've had some successes, I would say. We now have some demand transportation that we definitely didn't have before. On-demand transportation, and I don't know if
well, I can say that our infrastructure here in Greenfield is very poor for supporting public transportation. Our what do they call that? The barn, the bus barn, where buses go at the end of the day to rest. That is a wreck of a building.
Where is that building?
It's right down there by the old golf course on Deerfield Street.
Gotcha. I know that one. Okay.
So that was the Greenfield Transportation MTA building. And so when the FRTA started, they just used that old building. The town was asked if the FRTA could use that building, and Mayor Bill said, it's time for you to leave, build your own facility, go somewhere else. That building is falling down. And so finally, I think this year the construction has started in Turner's Falls.
It is going to be over in Montague, Turner's Falls area.
Yeah. And so with that new building, there will be a capability to do support for electric buses. We don't have that ability in Greenfield, in our barn.
And you could conceive of electric transportation, at least locally, which would be a beginning, right?
Yep. Yeah, we could have electric school buses too. But I think the other thing that I've seen in public transit in Greenfield, of course, the transit station was built. That was huge. So
it's a weird thing.
It is. It's not. It still hasn't. It hasn't met its potential, but it is physically there. And we also have we have bus stops. We have actual signage.
I've
where
seen
buses
some of those
stop.
showing up. Yes.
So each of these steps are important. And then of course COVID happened, so that's been kind of put things behind. Well, and another, not a bus transit thing, but of course Amtrak came to Greenfield, which was huge. Which is huge. It's still there, and we need to urge people to use the buses. And we need to urge people to use the train, and or we could lose them. So we need to. That's
I'd love to go to Manhattan, but I can't.
And then
do it right now.
There's COVID issues, right? You don't necessarily want to get on that train and go to Manhattan, but hopefully in the future that we won't have COVID in front of us. But these are all examples of, as you said, Edie, of spin-offs and just people, who care about the, at this point, climate change, but also sustainability in a very broad sense, putting their heads together, keeping their eyes open for opportunities to make things better, and then coming to Greening Greenfield and saying, hey, I see this is a problem, or this is a dream, or this is whatever it is, let's fix it, let's make it better. And so for the future, it could go on like that, and we would like to invite other people to join us to with those thoughts. And if the structure fits, that's great. We're definitely looking. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but for younger people. But most of the people who are working with us, we are I think we're all retired. Is that right? Well, except for maybe Peg, who does consulting. But it does take a lot of time to dig into the details of trying to find out, well, what's wrong with the transportation, what's wrong with the housing, what's wrong with, it takes a lot of time and effort, but still anybody can bring forward a problem that they see, and we'll see if anyone who's passionate about something we will come to us and we will listen to what you're passionate about and see if this is something that we want to take on as a group.
So we've brought it up to the current time, 2021, and it sounds like those are closing remarks. Do you have anything further that you'd want to be sure to have on the record?
No, I think that's that. Thank you so much for asking all these questions. Went down memory lane, and my memory is not so great.